Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I am here to introduce you to college admissions representatives and other professionals in the field of college admissions. Our purpose is to serve you, the students and parents, so that you may gain insights straight from the people who ultimately make the decisions. Regardless of whether you will apply to a particular school being highlighted in a given podcast episode, you should listen to all of them, as each guest will give you tremendous insight and advice on every aspect of the college admissions process. Lastly, if you have any questions you'd like me to cover on future episodes or any comments you'd like to share, please email me at collegeadmissionstalk@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit our website at www.collegeadmissionstalk.com. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now we continue with Asma, Malik, and part 2 of her 2-part episode regarding Syracuse University. Enjoy. Can you talk about students aspiring to play sports in college? What does the college admissions process look like for them? And what advice would you give students and parents related to the athletics recruitment process? Obviously, I know that Syracuse is a D1 school, so probably difficult to play, for the Orange. But what does the process look like, please?
Sure. So I think the NCAA website has a lot of really good resources in terms of timeline and what students should be focusing on. So if you want to play for a D1 school, there's some academic eligibility that you need to hit in terms of classes you've taken, and GPA needs to be there. But to kind of start that conversation with our coaches, it's tricky because it's all about timing. Our coach can't talk to you in like 9th and 10th grade, but they can start engaging with you in 11th. But technically, they're already building their roster for years, right? So my advice to students is, you have to register with the NCAA, so you do that. And then start putting intro emails together. So maybe it's your stats, maybe it's a short clip of playing, any awards you received, just getting on their radar, right? You can send it to the coach. Coach's information are always very visible on the website. So if you just go to Syracuse Athletics and you pick the sport you want, you'll see the entire roster there of players and coaches, and where you can contact them. And you can send it to them. I tell them, you can send it in 9th. You can send it in 10th. They might not be able to respond to you at that point, but don't underestimate, that intro email can do for you. And if you get on their radar once you are in 11th grade, they can start reaching out to you. There's a lot that you can do on your end to make sure that you're taking the right steps so you can play. So making sure you're taking the right classes. So this is where working with your guidance counselor is important, right? If you know D1 is your end goal and that's what you need to do, you need to make sure that those sequence of classes are good. Make sure you do well in those classes. Start the introduction to the schools that are on your roster. Work with your coaches. They have a lot of experience. There's a lot of amazing resources out there just to kind of explore on your own. And then if they're interested, they're going to reach out. They're going to find a way to find you, to see you play, or to bring you on campus. And then, that process is between you and them. When it comes to the admissions process, every college is different, but at SU, we have a small team of people in our office that are just dedicated to reading applications for athletes. And it's not that they're academic standards are any different. Students still need to be admissible to our programs, even if they're coming in to play for one of our teams. But there's that communication that has to take place with the coach, right? There's money involved, right? If you're a D1 school, you can give students money to play there and to attend the institution. So there's a conversation that has to happen for that. And then they'll kind of be the point person for the teams and then those athletes. So that's just an internal process that would happen. If you are being recruited and signed on, many times you are told in advance that, you're going to be admitted, this is what's going to look like. And then, you make the decision based on what your offerings are there. And you could get committed to a school fairly early on in that process. I just say, be careful, because I always have those nightmare stories every single year. They're like, well, the coach was really excited and said, like, I have a really good shot in admissions. And it's like, no one can predict the application pool that year, right? So based on stats of last year, yes, you might be completely admissible. But there's so many different factors that go into play. It's the number of students applying, the type of students applying, the institutional priorities, which I think we don't talk about enough. Like, every college has their own list of priorities that they have to hit. And sometimes that list changes. And then that changes the type of student I have to admit. So, nothing is final until it is in writing and it's from the admissions office. But it's, there's a lot of things that you can do to just start that process early, and just open communication is really important. And you can always find out who's the athletic liaison in the admissions office. You can connect with them too. So I think there's a lot of really good ways to just make sure that you make this as seamless as possible.
Again, tremendous insight, tremendous advice. Start the process early. Don't be bashful to reach out. The coach may not be able to reach out to you until you're in 11th grade, depending on the sports. But also registering with the NCAA if you're serious about playing Division I or at any level, regardless of whatever college you're applying to. Those are great pieces of advice. So how about on-site interviews with students? Do you conduct them? If so, what advice would you give students preparing for an interview?
So at Syracuse, they're completely optional. Like I said, over 40,000 applications. There is only like 20 of us in the office, so we cannot interview every single applicant, even though I wish I could. It's, because of the pandemic, we've just been completely virtual with interviews. And I think that's probably going to be here to stay, because we can do a lot more interviews than having them done in person. But, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Students can start interviewing the summer before senior year. So you don't have to wait till classes start senior year to do that. This is one thing, along with your essay, these are two things that you can do the summer before senior year. And the one thing you need to think about when you're interviewing is find out if that interview is informative or evaluative. So the difference is informative is just, you can ask questions, they'll ask questions, they might not be like noting anything that you discuss. And then evaluative is, they're going to be taking notes. They're going to be paying attention to how you're responding, and it can play a role in the admissions decision. So, many colleges, when you go to sign up for an interview online, will give you that information up front. They'll tell you what the timeline, maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, and who it might be with. At Syracuse, it's mostly with admissions reps, and maybe current students or some of our interns that are also current grad students. So, it just depends on the time you sign up and who's available, but no one is better to interview with. We're all interviewing because we can, and we're all asking kind of the same questions to get at the same things. A couple of things that you can do to prepare for the interview. Research. There's always, like, the college is going to ask, why are you interested in Syracuse, or why are you interested in University of Miami, or whatever school you're looking at. And it's not just, oh yeah, I just saw on your website and it was pretty cool. And no, like take it a step further. Maybe it's an academic program. Maybe you just had a visit and the visit sparked your interest and you could really see yourself there. Maybe it's internship opportunity, it's faculty, it's research. There's so much. And when you're genuinely doing research about that institution, this list will naturally, be put together. So make sure you have some talking points ready for that. And, this is also an opportunity for you to shed light on something in your application that maybe you can't do. So maybe it's a dip in grades. Maybe it's just challenges that you had with, being virtual or being hybrid. Maybe what your future aspirations are and your goals are. And, just give us information that helps us understand your personality and who you are as a person. And I promise you, we're all nice people, and we're very easy to talk to, and the conversation will naturally start to flow. But I also understand, like, students are nervous, and it's okay. Some students will outright tell me. I always tell them, like, don't be nervous. I'm not asking trick questions. They're like, I'm so nervous, and that's okay. Like, just be honest, because sometimes that might play into the way the conversation goes. If you're so nervous and you're second guessing yourself and you're just not being as thorough with your responses, we understand. Like, once again, you are 17, 18 years old. I'm not going to expect you to conduct yourself as, like, a 25-year-old that would be interviewing for a job in my office, right? But just be honest and be genuine. I promise you, it's going to be easier that way. And it's okay to take notes. You can tell them, I'm just going to jot some things down. And please have at least one question ready to ask, because I'll have a series of questions and students answer. And then I'm like, so do you have any questions for me? No, I'm good. Like, what? You just take the time to interview with me. You have nothing. There's nothing on your mind that Google couldn't help you find. And I always tell students, I do like a lot of interview workshops at some schools. And I tell them, you can always just flip it, because I know sometimes questions get answered during conversation, but be like, so tell me, what do you like about your institution? Or what would you like to change about your institution? Or how did you get to this job, right? Just something to show that you are able to engage in conversation that is not just one-sided, because at the end of the day, this interview will help me determine how you might interact in our classroom. And since we have small classroom sizes, I need to see that you can sustain that conversation in this one-on-one setting. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfection, but it is really good to see when a student is prepared. And honestly, it's okay. Maybe you are that person that just doesn't do well with talking to strangers one-on-one that you just don't know. That's okay. No worries. Just don't do the interview. And, relay all the information you want us to know about you through the application, and that's okay. Students that don't interview are not put at a disadvantage in the process, because we know that we have such limited capacity, right, to interview. We just can't, and we can't accommodate everyone, so that's okay. But if you're really interested in the school, they're kind of on your top 5 list, they do offer interviews, you feel comfortable doing it, I would recommend it. It's a great way to demonstrate interest, and I know we didn't touch upon that a little bit, but just like how you engage, how often you engage with the college, sometimes is taken into account when we read a file. So interviewing is one way to, like, demonstrate that interest. And there's a lot of other ways, but it's a great opportunity to have that personal approach. And a lot of times students walk away, they're like, oh, this wasn't as bad. And I was like, yeah, it's not supposed to be difficult.
Right, it's not supposed to be bad.
No, it's supposed to be a good conversation. You're supposed to walk out of this conversation with something, whether it's solidifying your decision to apply to this school or having your questions answered that maybe you couldn't find online. And then, at the same time, just telling me information that I'm not going to get from the application, or just kind of giving me more information to go off of. And they're very simple questions, talk about your extracurriculars, maybe what is one thing that you could have changed. if you could do high school all over again, what did you learn about yourself during the most challenging course you took in high school? It's simple things that you should be able to respond to regardless, if you've had some time to reflect on your high school experience.
I hope the students are writing those questions down because, it really reminds me of the essay. Again, the transcript, teacher letters of recommendations, those are things that get sent in. But in the essay, in the interview, if you have one, that's really the opportunity where you could show off your personality. And I like what you said at the end, because if you have an interview, it's you to school looking at the potential candidate, but it's also very important for the student to get a feel to see if this is the right fit for them. So it's a fascinating process. And, again, I appreciate this awesome conversation. My next question is around early decision. There's a feeling that if you go ED, that you have an advantage. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. How does it work at Syracuse University?
So I think this is one thing where context is important. At the end of the day, academic standards are not going to change for any institution, right? We still need to admit students that are going to thrive in our classroom, whether they come in through early decision or they come in through regular decision. I will say, think about a couple of things. Number one, is it easier because they're more flexible with the academics, or is it easier just because you're competing with a smaller group of students? And it's always going to be you are competing with a smaller group of students. To kind of give you some information and background, with SU, we maybe have a little more than 1,100 or 1,200 applications for early decision. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, we bring in about a little more than 3,600 students for the first year. So if I have, 1,200 applications for a full class of 3,650, whatever the number is, there are a lot more seats available, right? And students that are obviously willing to say, like, if you admit me, I'm going to enroll. Every college likes that, right? Because at the end of the day, we still have to meet certain numbers and we have to meet certain guidelines and institutional priorities. So the student that applies and is willing to make that commitment is obviously going to be more attractive to that college. And if you're in the middle 50% of academics, great, you're an easy admit. But sometimes students that might be right on the cusp, right? Maybe they're a borderline applicant for us. And we see the academic potential there. They just maybe had a rough high school start, or, the middle was a little tough with the pandemic, whatever it may be. Or, they're falling short in certain areas, but we feel like they could still thrive in our community. We might be more inclined to admit because they're willing to make that commitment, right? So you also have to think about there's a certain percentage of students that are going to be admitted and enrolled through early decision. Every college takes that into account because that will help us determine how many seats we have to fill through regular decision. So for Syracuse, it's a smaller pool that's applying. In the grand scheme of things, if you look at our regular decision pool, it's like over 38,000 students applying for fewer seats because a certain percentage is already allocated for early decision students. So because we have so many students applying, we have so many options, then naturally the admissions process becomes more competitive because we have more apps in the pool to work with, versus in ED, it's a smaller pool and it's a full set of seats that we have. So always you have to understand that there's that numbers behind the ED or early action. At Syracuse doesn't have early action, but there are schools that do offer that, and how that might come into play in terms of your competitiveness in the application pool. So academic standards are not going to change. They might be able to be a little bit flexible on certain things, but other things, that I have every year. I deny students for early decision, even though I know they're willing to make that commitment. And They talk about us being their number one and they've been in communication with me, but like if I don't feel like they're going to thrive in our academic environment, it's just not the right space for them. And it's also the other thing you have to think about when it comes to early decision is that financial component. You're not going to be able to compare financial aid packages from many other institutions. Unless you apply early action at other schools, you can only apply early decision to one school. And we give you a decision within 6 weeks. So how are you going to know what other schools are offering and how what's going to be out there? So it's a huge commitment, to go down that ED route. But I always tell students, you got to read the fine print. There's this contract you sign, and the contract does say if you are admitted and for some reason we cannot give you a financial aid package that is conducive for your family, you can be released from there. But I don't want students to try to like game the system, because that's not the way it works. As we can see financial aid documentations, right? That's the FAFSA, the CSS profile. I get all that. And not me personally, the financial aid office gets all of that. So we use that information to determine a financial aid package. So if you're coming back to me and you're saying like, hey, this doesn't work, and I'm like, your tax documents indicate otherwise. That's going to be a conversation. It's not that easy to get out of. So it is a huge commitment. Parents have that conversation about finances early on with your child. So you could set realistic expectations, especially if you're going to be applying early decision. It's not by gaming the system. And like you're not going to get anything out of that. It's just finding the right school for you, not finding the right school, period, because every school has amazing offerings and you can thrive at multiple colleges and be successful. But it's finding the right school for you and the right fit for you.
That's awesome, and I really appreciate the insight in terms of the overall process. I know the question was about going early decision, but just in terms of the no-show factor, when you go into the regular application pool, and I know that it's in the tens of thousands for Syracuse, but I could imagine that there's just a formula where you say, okay, we admit X amount, and we know that 40%, 50%, whatever the number is, are actually going to consider coming. And then on top of that, every year it's different. The pool is different. So the statistics change, the data changes. So it's just, it's a fascinating process. And to hear you talk about it is just so interesting. So again, thank you for your insight. Let's shift gears here for a second, and let me ask you about the teacher letter of recommendations. How many do you ask for? Should they submit supplemental recommendations? And last part of that question, is there an example that you could share that was just phenomenal?
So when it comes to teacher's letter recommendation, we require 2. We prefer that they be core subject teachers. While we understand the value in the arts and music and these elective courses, we are a school that's kind of trying to focus on the core subjects, because that is usually a good indication of how they would do in college classes. But at the same time, like I said, it's a humanistic process, and we understand that these past years have been a little challenging to connect with your teachers like you normally would. So maybe the teacher that you connected with is, the last one was like a 9th or 10th grade teacher, and it might not be in a core subject. And you get one teacher letter recommendation that's from a core subject and one is non-core subject. We will be flexible. But just know that it's highly recommended to get the core subject teachers. And then you have the guidance counselor letter recommendations, which are my favorite because it's like all encompassing. It just covers everything. It covers academics, it covers personal fit, it covers college potential, and they're really great. So those are the 3 that we need. When it comes to the letters of recommendation, what I try to take away from it is like more context behind that grade that you got on your transcript. It's great to see that you got an A minus or an A. Sometimes the best letter of recommendations are from the classes where students get a B or a B plus, because that teacher can really speak to the student's ability to tackle a difficult situation. You know, maybe you didn't do well in that class, but you worked so hard and you sought so many resources that it really left a very positive impression for the teacher. And they have a lot more to talk about in that letter than just saying, yeah, a student did great, they thrive in pre-calculus, they got an A in my class, and that's it. But other things I'm looking for, how do you work with your peers? You know, if you're in a group setting, do you take that leadership role? And if you don't, maybe you're that quiet organizer and that's your strength. You know, how you interact in that classroom setting is important. And a lot of students are like, yeah, but then I was virtual. But I was like, yeah, how you engage in that virtual classroom is also important. Were you the kid with the camera was always off? You never asked the questions, the teacher's constantly picking on you and you're not responding? Or were you the one that made the extra effort to log in early, right? To be engaged the entire time, to ask questions later on, to be respectful of your peers' opinions, right? So that interaction is really important that a teacher can give us. But also we want to see how you build connections with your teachers, right? With adults, how do you interact with these individuals is important because you're very likely going to have the same style in college. So those are certain things that we're really taking away. And you know, some letters of recommendations I read, I'm like, it's 2 pages long, and I'm like, do you know I have less than 10 minutes to read this file? I have another 41,000 applications that, you know, to go through with my peers. So, you know, my advice when it comes to letters of recommendations, if you can give your teachers some information to work with, then they can kind of structure the letter in a way that's going to be helpful. So, for example, if you know you are applying to a mathematics program, right? Letting them know that you're applying to, you know, applied mathematics major in college. Okay, they can then tailor the examples that they put in that letter of recommendation that's more in line with that, right? Or maybe there's certain skills that you have that you just want them to be aware of. You could tell them that. You know, sometimes teachers will write about extracurricular activity lists too, but it's like, I'm getting that already from somewhere else, and they really can't speak to it in such a in-depth manner. Sometimes they can, because sometimes teachers also serve as coaches and they serve as advisors, and that's great if they do and they can give us that different perspective. But like, you don't really need to have them go over that. Your counselors will do it. You will write about it in the letter. I mean, in your list of extracurriculars. So really kind of focus on those aspects that I'm not going to get when I look at the transcript, right? So it's just your level of engagement, how you work with your peers, how well do you do with difficult material, and how do you seek out resources if you are struggling in a little bit. So I think sometimes those are the best letters that could just give me an example of how the student did in the classroom or work with their peers. I'm always highlighting that. And then when I'm doing my write-up, and I'm like, letter of recommendation indicates student does very well in a group setting, you know, works well with peers, is a natural leader, or maybe they're quiet, but they're some examples teachers give me, it's like, the student is quiet, but they are so supportive of their peers that it's that level of encouragement that they can give their peers is amazing. I'm like, oh my God, yes, we want that kid in our classroom. Like, that positive energy is so important. And how you handle yourself in that setting, your level of maturity is also going to come through that letter of recommendation.
And maybe students shouldn't be shy to ask teachers to write about such things, right? Yeah. Because if you receive a letter where a teacher is basically reiterating what's on the activity sheet, it's really pointless and it's a waste of letter. So students, you know, when you're talking to your teachers, like you said, if you're going to be a math major, you know, maybe there's something that could be highlighted regarding that. If you're quiet, but you're so supportive of your peers, or if you're a natural leader in the class. If you're the kind of kid that walks into the room and lights it up, if the teacher could articulate that in a letter so that, again, it goes back to your personality, I think that's, tremendous advice, again, as opposed to just reiterating what's on the activity sheet. So thank you for that. And, my next question, I guess, is about college visits, right? Whether virtual or in person. Is that something that you guys in admissions actually track? And does it make a difference, in terms of the application process?
So this is going to be different for every college. At SU, we do track when students sign up for a virtual session, an in-person visit, or a mock class. When you email me, we can see all that. We have very sophisticated systems that even when we send you an email, I can tell if you opened it. I can tell how long you opened it for, how many clicks you had in that email. It's very easy for us to see that. At Syracuse University, I would say when it comes to the admissions process, the level of engagement that you've had, like demonstrated interest, I spoke about that a little bit ago. It doesn't always play a huge role in the admission, like the initial admissions decision round, but students that maybe get waitlisted and we have very few seats, and then we're looking to see which students to take off the wait list and offer them admissions. The students that have engaged with us the most, probably we have a higher chance of enrolling. And every college wants that. They want guarantee that that student's going to come to their school. And that level of engagement might play a big role in that process at that time. So every college is going to use it differently. At SU, yes, we are tracking everything. So when I do a virtual high school visit or an in-person visit, and I ask you to scan that QR code and fill out that annoying form, or I give you that long contact card, back in the days when we did in-person college fairs, those forms you would fill out, that's all of us trying to gather the information so we can know exactly where we met you at one point. So it's important that you register for events in advance so we have that information to engage with you, but also just we're tracking everything. And engagement can happen well before 11th or 12th grade. I have some students that they know SU is their number one, they're in 9th grade, they're already signing up for things, and that's okay. The more research you do, the more exploration you have, the more information you're going to have to make a well-informed decision, right? So I don't want students to feel like, oh my God, I need to have 13 different points of demonstrated interest. No, there's no special formula. And honestly, as you research institutions, that demonstrated interest will naturally happen. You're going to go to their website. You're going to click through, sign up for events. You're going to want to maybe sign up for an interview. You're going to, maybe there's a opportunity to talk to a current student. You'll do that. You're going to go out of your way to make time for this because you're genuinely interested. The school that you're just kind of putting on your list for the heck of putting on the list, the quality of the application you're going to produce there and the level of engagement is going to be lower naturally. So we can tell maybe how serious you are about the school. And I think, the one good thing out of this pandemic in college admissions, with obviously test optional, but it's also that we have just so many more resources available for students. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to start the research process for a college way before you even step foot on our campus, right? And I encourage students, you should do some of those virtual sessions before you step foot on campus, because you will already have a certain understanding. So when you are there, you are going to look at it in a very different lens, because the very basics, right? You're going to look at the student interaction. You're going to see how the liberal arts core curriculum classes work at this X, Y, and Z college within the university, because you understand what the curriculum is at SU instead of having to learn it on the spot and then be like, all right, how are they engaging with each other? I tell students, engagement is for you. Yes, colleges love to, have students reach out and tell, you're great, you're amazing, I would love to come here. But at the end of the day, it is for you to find the right place. And the only way you could do that is researching in different areas of the college. So it's faculty, it's student engagement, academic resources, career development, retention. How do you support students that maybe financially have changes in their household incomes second year, right? Like really digging deeper about the community and the resources is going to help you make the best decision.
Tremendous advice again. And, one of the main points of this podcast is really to give this kind of insight to students and, of course, their parents. So students, she just gave some tremendous advice there. If you receive an email from an admissions rep, make sure you open it, make sure you read it, make sure you engage, go into a mock classroom if the college that you're interested in offers it. And, these are the little things that you can do, even as early as ninth grade. Right? You don't have to wait till 11th grade to say, oh, okay, where am I going to apply to now? But these are, many things that you can do to make your candidacy for admissions possible. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone else out there does as well. And so in closing, I guess I'll ask my last question. What are the 3 top pieces of advice or recommendations you would give students and their parents getting ready to apply to college?
So, number 1, parents, I know we take care of our children all their lives, for a majority of our life too, right? And it's sometimes hard to take a step back and let the child take control of the process, especially, something as important of where they're going to go to college for the next 2 or 4 or, 8 years if they decide to go for a professional degree. But it's really important to let them own this process. And you're really just going to set them up for success by teaching them independency now. And they're just going to thrive in that environment when they get to college a lot better. So it doesn't mean that you're not involved. I think you just need to pick moments where you step in. Or you give your opinions, let them formulate their opinions. I see it all the time when families come to campus and they're on a tour and the parents are like constantly like making comments. I'm like, let the kid process this, like let them make their own opinion. And like, everyone should be making a list because I promise you everything is going to get blurred. But during your tour, students, like, just on your phone, on the notes section, something you like, something you didn't like. You can get in the car. Parents, families, let your child start that conversation, right? See where their head is at with that. And then you can give them your perspective because obviously you have life experiences that they don't. So it's going to be helpful for them to hear, but at the same time, it's better for them to take charge of that. So more independency for them is better. And I understand, I get the phone calls during the day. They're like, my child is at school right now, so they can't call. I'm like, well, we are also here till 5 p.m. So, and I know they have a cell phone. So you can always, they can call. But there are certain things that, especially when it comes to finances, the parents are going to be the ones that are in communication with us. And that's okay. But on the topic of finances, please start this conversation early. Set realistic expectations for students. Whether it's, whatever college you decide to enroll, you cover 2 years of tuition, I cover 2 years. I have some families that say that. Like, I will do first and second year. So you have to get whatever scholarships you get. And if you need to take out student loans for the next 2 years to make this happen, then you do so, right? Every family's ability to afford college is going to be different. For other families, it's sometimes you can go to a private school if they're coming X percentage more than like a state school, right? It's whatever it is, you have to start that conversation early. And just because you might be fronting the bill doesn't mean that the student does not have responsibility financially. They still need to do well in classes. They still need to take full-time classes to make sure they keep that scholarship, that grant, that loan status. So they're still involved in this process, and you're only going to help them for them to like understand how finances work because they're going to need this. It's a life skill that you're going to need. But also it just makes the conversation and stress a little bit more manageable when students have a realistic understanding. And doesn't mean that you eliminate schools that might have a high sticker price, because there's so many schools that will have tuition discounts, and depending on how strong you are as a student, you'll get scholarships. If you have need, based on your financial documentation, you can get grants for that. So you're never going to pay that full sticker price, and you don't know how much that's going to be unless you apply, because the application pool is different every year. And as John mentioned, like, things are constantly shifting year to year. So I won't know what that package is going to look like until you actually apply that year. But having realistic expectations set beforehand will allow the student to be like, okay, this is my top choice, but they are 10,000 more than where my family needs to be. And this is where advocacy comes into play, right? Pick up the phone, call your admissions rep, email your admissions rep. Thank you for the admission offer, but this does not work for my family. I need X amount to make this happen. It doesn't hurt to ask, right? And what's the worst? I say, sorry, I don't have more money to give you. At least you still have the admission offer, you still have the financial aid packages, and you could still compare, right? And then you can make the best possible decision for you and your family. Other times, sometimes colleges have a couple of thousand to spare, and when you have an admission offer from a school, the ball is in your court, right? Now the conversation is different. Before you wanted us, and now we want you, right? So we're going to try our best to make sure that we enroll the student, because we don't want to have to make more offers. So advocacy is really important, but starting that financial conversation is important. And my last piece of advice is, and I know this is really hard for a 17, 18-year-old student coming out of high school. Trust me, I taught high school students, I know. You have this vision that the only way you are going to be successful is go to this specific college and study this specific thing, or have your straight path to success. And it's not going to happen like that, and that's okay. College is really a great time for you to explore. Like, you can take classes that you've never had access to in high school, and that will really open up doors and your eyes to different career paths. And like, trust me, 4 years from now, there's probably, some type of industry that we don't know about right now, but we're going to need in 4 years. And college is a really great place to help you develop the skill set you need to thrive in that environment. And, you don't have to look at schools that like majority of the students at your high school are applying to. I think sometimes, especially in the suburbs, you kind of get stuck on those like top 30 because that's where everyone applies. But, college is really what you make of it. You can go to an Ivy League institution, but not pay attention in class, not engage with faculty, not take advantage of the resource they have, and you're not going to be successful. Just because you have that degree does not equal success. But you can go to a state school, and amazing state SUNY options out there. But if you engage on every single level, you take advantage of everything that they have to offer, I promise you your level of success is going to be higher. Because at the end of the day, you have more control in this process than you think you do. So it's okay. Keep your options open. Keep your mind open. Be flexible, because it's going to help you in kind of developing your path. And I promise you, I always talk to students after they graduate. They're like, when I spoke to you 5 years ago when I was in high school, I never thought that I would change my major twice and I would have this amazing internship opportunity. And here I am in something that I didn't even know existed, and I'm loving life, and I love the journey I had to get there. So I know it's really hard as a young teenager to see that in the long run, but you're going to do great as long as you put your best foot forward in everything that you do.
Asma, I cannot thank you enough. It's been a true honor and a pleasure listening to you, walking us through the entire process. I am so glad we had this time together, as I know that it is going to be a tremendous resource for so many students and their parents.
I hope so.
Even though you said parents, parents let the kids kind of advocate for themselves. But yes, we love the parents, we love the students, and that's why we're here. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Good luck, everyone. And if you ever need any help, you can just go on the admissions website at Syracuse University. I'm more than happy to answer your questions by email.
Thank you again, Asma. Truly appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP.